Comcast's decision to split off NBCU highlights the company's many strategic missteps with streaming video. Listen on to learn more.
And welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Stream. This is Will Richmond from Video News, and that was Colin Dixon's voice there, Colin, at the beginning. Colin, you are up to your eyeballs in World Cup, and I'm happy to say I actually watched the USA game last night.
It was a great game. Lots of controversy over the red card. And we need to get on with this podcast, Will, because you're keeping me away from watching the games.
Okay, well, God forbid. So let's go ahead and jump right in. We're going to do a couple of quick news items, and then, as you said at the top, we're going to get into talking about this Comcast NBCU split that was announced earlier this week. So just very quickly, what I want to talk about was last week there was another deal announced that I think is adjacent to our Fox Roku discussion of 2 weeks ago. And that was last week's announcement that Walmart is acquiring Vibe for somewhere around $1.2, $1.4 billion. Vibe is a company that's flown a little bit below the radar. It's a platform for buying CTV ads for basically small to medium-sized businesses. They kind of compare themselves, they position themselves as Meta, or let's call it Facebook for CTV. So trying to capture the long tail of advertisers that have been essentially boxed out of advertising on TV, both because it's prohibitively expensive for them to do so, and also because the friction and putting together creative, everything else just doesn't make it feasible. So Walmart has acquired that business, just piggybacking on their acquisition of Vizio. And again, I'm connecting a bunch of dots here that I may be blending into speculation, but I just want to say it anyway, that it feels like an interesting deal for Walmart because they obviously have, thousands and thousands of vendors that sell their products in Walmart stores. They also now own Vizio, of course. The ability to allow those vendors to be able to advertise on Vizio TVs seamlessly and also cost effectively, potentially as part of a package deal type of thing that they would have with Walmart, just like a vendor gets an end cap display or something like that in store. Now they'd be able to get some type of benefit on CTV, and then have those ads be interactive to the point that a viewer could very quickly put the item advertised in their Walmart.com shopping cart, and then check out. All of that seems like it fits together very nicely for Walmart, and it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds, if I'm even right in sort of the dots that I've just connected. But, this relates, I think, to Fox Roku because, as we talked about 2 weeks ago, Fox acquiring Roku means that Fox has now put itself into direct competition with both Walmart via Vizio, but certainly Amazon also via Prime Video and also via Fire TV. So this, in my view, acquisition of Vibe maybe raises the competitive bar even further for the Fox Roku deal to end up working out. And also, I think, represents an interesting counterweight to what Amazon is already doing in this space, the interactive ad space, and being able to put items in your cart. So anyway, just wanted to raise that deal as a footnote to our Fox Roku discussion from 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. And it certainly does seem to make a lot of sense. But I tell you, there's one thing they did this week that I don't think they'll be doing in the future, and that is they announced us a new line of cheap TVs based on Roku. So they're gonna these are aimed at young adults and kids. And as I say, they're based on Roku. And as this competition between Fox and them sharpens, I have a feeling that they're probably not going to be doing that. They should be focusing on Vizio and their really great watch-free service. So we have to see how that shapes up in the future. But I don't think this deal was obviously creating TVs with Walmart takes a while. So this has probably started much before any announcement with Fox. But maybe we will see in the future them focusing much more on the Vizio operating system and WatchFree.
So let's go on. You had a quick news item this week also.
I do. One of the things that continues to be a big challenge, I think, for regions other than the US is maintaining the visibility of their media in front of their populations. And countries continue to wrestle with this. And there's news in Britain this week that the government is considering forcing social media companies to prioritize what the government called trusted news sources as part of its broader push to tighten regulations of the whole sector. So the interesting thing here is, of course, this would affect YouTube and the television, because so much YouTube is watched on TV these days, and it would elevate the local broadcast channels, people like BBC, ITV, and Channel 4. Those are principal broadcasters in the UK. It would elevate their content, their news content in particular, in the searches and feeds of users using services like YouTube. So I don't know how I feel about this per se, Will, because I don't like to see anybody's content favored. But that said, it is very important to Britain to make sure that people in Britain get British news first. So I understand what they're trying to do. Is this the right way to do it? I don't know, but I definitely understand the imperative to do it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. The imperative is there for sure. All of society is diminished if our public media and our local broadcasting goes away. But the competitive forces are doing that, as we know, year by year. And it seems like the government stepping in with some type of light touch regulation to help preserve those broadcasters is going to be important.
Yeah, I think so. And to put it in context, I mean, imagine if in the US, rather than CBS, ABC, and NBC, we started getting, I don't know, Al Jazeera or something news pushed at us first in our feeds. We wouldn't want that. So having legislation to guarantee that sort of thing doesn't happen is probably the right way to go for the UK. And I would expect to see other regions do this as well.
Well, except that here in the U.S., as we know, we've gone in the opposite direction where the administration has cut funding to our public media stations. So
yes, indeed.
No easy answers there. But speaking of no easy answers, let's talk about this Comcast NBC Universal split, which has obviously received a lot of coverage this week. And we also want to throw our 2 cents in. So probably not worth spending a whole lot of time on the deal itself. The details actually were pretty thin, but basically a company announcing that it's going to split into 2 units. Comcast, which will be the communications company, and NBCU, which is really kind of a hodgepodge of a number of different businesses. It's the broadcast the broadcast network, of course, the studio, Peacock, Universal Parks, and Sky is going to be a part of NBCU as well, the new company. So a lot of different things going on. I would like to spend a little time today talking about I think the fundamental issue that NBC Universal has faced, and really by extension Comcast has faced in this last sort of 5 to 10 year period, which is that they have never been able to devise a successful streaming video strategy. And while the rest of the world has basically raced to try to build out successful streaming companies, Comcast seems like they have just flailed at every turn. And the biggest, of course, initiative has been Peacock, which was launched in July of 2020. To date, Peacock has probably lost at least $11 billion. They've never had a profitable quarter. there's talk of them possibly being profitable in this past Q2, the quarter that just closed earlier this week. Even then, it may be a result of some ways that they amortize some of the content and sports costs. So it's not clear how durable that profit would actually be. Peacock has basically hovered in the range of 40 to 46 million subscribers since early 2025. And, per Nielsen, the gauge, their share is typically running in the sort of mid 1% range. That's a distant 8th place relative to other streaming services. They periodically spike, and that's really related to some of the marquee sports rights that NBC Universal acquired. We're talking, of course, about the Super Bowl, Olympics. They have the NFL Thanksgiving game. But Peacock is really a story of a late-to-the-party, subscale streaming service that has been basically stuck in neutral, give or take, from a subscriber standpoint. And very importantly, I think, has been troubled from a strategy standpoint, basically from day one. So listeners will recall that back in July of 2020, when Peacock was launched, at the launch event, which was orchestrated by Linda Yaccarino, who at the time was running the advertising business for NBC Universal, the word that was probably used more during that presentation was free. Free, free, free was the theme of that entire presentation. Peacock was going to be this free service, and isn't this wonderful? Nothing is better than free, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the free tier lasted all of 2.5 years. By January of 2023, the free tier was phased out in favor of paid tiers. The cost of the paid tiers has done nothing but go up since then. And this, I think, is directly related to how late Peacock was to coming to the streaming party, and how, the reality is that the competition, the competitive bar in streaming was already really, really high in July of 2020 when it launched. Just as a reminder, at that time, Netflix already had 193 million subscribers. They've, of course, now almost doubled that. They're over 350, 360 million now. So they were coming really late. They were sort of hobbled by this change in strategy. The free service actually was quite successful when it launched, but then it was part of a broader theme of the fast services launching. So it was possible that there was a free strategy to pursue there, but it never really got the time to be fully tested. And so here we are now with Comcast with a total market cap of about $80 billion. They have not said how the two companies might be valued when the split occurs. But even assuming 50-50, and I really don't know whether that number is correct or not, the overall NBC Universal operation, let's just say 50-50 again, would be a $40 billion market cap. Worth remembering that Comcast acquired Sky for approximately $40 billion not that long ago. So I don't know what they believe the carrying value of that is, if the entire NBCU operation could be valued at basically the same amount. And Peacock's valuation, there's been a lot of speculation about whether NBC Universal, the company, will now be acquired by another company. And Netflix, of course, is the name that's been most often raised. But, again, NBC Universal has a hodgepodge of businesses. A company like Netflix is unlikely to be interested in things like Sky or even the parks, for that matter, completely different business than Netflix is in. Any acquirer is probably only going to be interested in pieces of NBCU. Also worth mentioning that it wasn't just a few months ago that Comcast spun off Versant, which is the cable networks group, and now, I mean, the idea that NBCU is going to be split off, certainly that idea doesn't come to them overnight. So it certainly must have been germinating somewhere in the company as the Versant spinoff was going on. So questions there about whether they've even executed these spinoffs and splits as optimally as they can. But overall, and I'll just leave it this, Colin, so you can jump in. But overall, I think that there is really no other major media company that has performed worse in the streaming video era than has Comcast and NBC Universal. And it's, I think, incredibly unfortunate because they started all this with some really key advantages.
Ouch. That's a pretty big condemnation of what
Well, is there anyone
has
worse?
done.
I mean, start with the final question. Is there anyone worse from a legacy media standpoint that you can think of?
I guess not. And I think what it really illustrates, Will, is a lack of vision of Comcast's management team. The problem was that they clung so stolidly to cable for so long that it hobbled NBCU in doing what it needed to do at a absolutely critical period. So, they bought NBCU in 2011. There was a lot of alignment at that time between that and its cable business. It, by having NBCU in-house, it would cut it would boost margins on their cable business because they wouldn't have to pay for the cable, the NBCU channels anymore. They'd also have an additional revenue flow where other pay TV operators were paying them for the NBCU channels. So there was some strong alignment there.
Can I just, I know, Colin, that they still pay for the NBC channels. Who knows what they were doing internally with the costs, but they weren't getting them for free. That wasn't part of the model.
No, but it certainly improved, I guess, the margins of the overall company, right? Well, however, they were accounting internally for it. So there was that aspect to things. That happened in 2011. And, I suppose you could argue that it would have been very early for them to recognize the threat from streaming. But, 2014, CBS launched CBS All Access. So they certainly recognized it as an opportunity in 2014, just 3 years later. They bought Sky in 2018, late 2018, they bought Sky. And Sky, at its heart, continues to be a satellite TV system. It does have quite a lot of media assets that are carried by other UK services. So there is that aspect to Sky. So there is slightly more alignment between Sky and NBCU than with Xfinity and NBCU. But not that much. And as you say, I think it's a misfit and it will be a distraction to a separate NBCU company. So I think what this really does is it shows pretty clearly the penalty Comcast has paid for sticking its head in the sand on the threat and opportunity that streaming offered them. So the result is that we now have a Peacock which is solidly focused on sports, continues to add costs to their business without apparently growing subscribers strongly. Remember, they have just added NBA, and we haven't seen a massive increase in subscribers to support that. They have increased the price, which I am not happy about because I'm now paying more to watch Premier League for NBA, for which I have no interest. The old cable model rears its head again. I think there's a lot of problems with that business. And it's held NBCU back from doing things that would have made a lot of sense for it if it had done it earlier. For example, launching a real free streaming service, like something like a Pluto TV or a Tubi, which are doing quite well, thank you very much, for Fox and for Paramount Global. So it sort of prevented it from doing things like that and launching a regular streaming subscription service much earlier as well. So there's that aspect of things. Looking forward, what would happen with NBCU going forward once it's spun out, it can go on, well, it needs to grow. That's the first thing. It needs to have more assets so that it can launch new services and increase revenue income. That's absolutely critical. There are some obvious targets, like I think it just launched some sort of reseller deal with Stars. So maybe it will buy Stars. Maybe there's a deal to be done with a smaller company like AMC, where they come together. So there is an opportunity, I think, for it to grow. Can it grow fast enough to be competitive in the streaming space? It's so late into this business where we're already seeing behemoths come into existence. The consolidation of Paramount Global with WBD, for example. Netflix is, of course, the big dog. YouTube is taking a ton of viewing time, and that, of course, is mostly a free business. So I really don't know the future of a standalone NBCU, if it can be a viable business. As you mentioned, Netflix has been mentioned as a potential purchaser, but there's so much of this business that doesn't align well with what Netflix is looking for. Sure, they have a studio, which Netflix definitely wants, and they have a great library of TV content and movie content, which Netflix would definitely want. But if you look at the strategic positioning of Peacock now, it's 100% behind the most expensive media out there, live sports, something that Netflix has repeatedly said it is not interested in entering. So there's that. It also has Sky. Netflix definitely is not interested in Sky, so would want to get rid of that.
Yeah.
And, whether they want to get into theme parks, I don't know. I mean, maybe that would be interesting. I have no idea. All I can say is this is not a clean deal. Like Warner Brothers Discovery would have been a much cleaner deal for Netflix than this.
Right. And there's, as you just said, to summarize the NBCU businesses, Netflix might be interested in the studio. They might be interested in the library. Unlikely they're interested in Sky, the parks, NBCU broadcast, Peacock, Bravo, or any other sort of bits and pieces that are NBCU. So, and also worth noting here, as I understand it, is that this deal probably isn't going to finish off until sometime, could be a year from now. In order to maintain, apparently, the tax-free split benefits to shareholders, neither company can be sold within 2 years of the split.
Wow.
So now we're talking about 3 years from now. We're talking sometime in 2029 to make this a tax-efficient acquisition for some other company. And, who knows what the world is going to look like by that point. And, if I had to bet, is Peacock worth more or less 3 years from now?
We know the answer.
I think we know the answer. So this NBCU company seems to be challenged in lots of ways. And I just also want to spend a moment, if we can, Colin, talking about, kind of the path not taken here by Comcast. And, you're smiling because I periodically come back to this.
I know where you're going.
Inside the Stream listeners will know this is by far my favorite hobby horse of anything that we've talked about. But, way back in 2018, I proposed the idea that Comcast buy out the partners in Hulu. At the time, of course, they owned a third of Hulu. It was Fox and Disney each owning the other third, and Time Warner owned 10%. This deal for Hulu, for them to have bought out the other 30%, the other 60% that they didn't own, probably would have run them around $13 to $15 billion, which in Comcast world is not a lot of money. Also put it in the context of losing the $11 billion on Peacock over the last 6 years or so. You start to see what the relative amounts are. But They would have gotten Hulu, which had the national footprint, the great brand, the advertising chops. They had excellent management back then as well. And they could have basically avoided launching Peacock in the first place. And instead, this convoluted thing happened where they instead they made a bid for Fox, which was beat by Disney. And in turn, as we talked about before, they ended up buying Sky for almost $40 billion, a completely new move to go international. All this, of course, was happening, as we talked about a moment ago, all this was happening while streaming was already well recognized as where the future was. I mean, again, Netflix, over 190 million subscribers back then. YouTube was already an 800-pound gorilla. Comcast had an opportunity to own Hulu, and they didn't do it. And I think that was a huge strategic mistake by them. There was no other streaming business of Hulu's size at that time. I think there were over 20 million subscribers already that Comcast could have built on. And now we know that Hulu is actually going to be sunsetted by Disney. So, you know, it's a brand that has, basically lost most of its value to Disney. And it was something that could have been I think, a really good platform for Comcast to have, as they were certainly going to be anticipating cord cutting coming, streaming rising, scale being everything, it being complementary to NBCU through advertising and new subscriptions. So I'm like a dog with a bone in its mouth. I cannot let go of what a huge opportunity that was for Comcast. Instead, what they did was they sold the stake to Disney. They made some money on it, to be sure, but nothing compared to what the opportunity cost was. So anyway, thanks for letting me have my say on that dog and bone.
Yeah, well, I think at the time of all of these machinations, I was very, very critical of the broadcast industry just in general, because I don't think they recognized the opportunity they had with Hulu generally, which it would have solved some problems, some strategic problems for them at the time, which was, ad skipping with DVRs. They could have transitioned into a business where they controlled the ads, they controlled the experience, and created a focal point for broadcast online that every single American home would have needed. And instead, they've fragmented the market, and now each of them are struggling to be competitive individually in the streaming space against giants like Netflix and YouTube. So yeah. It was an opportunity lost for them, and they never recognized the true value of Hulu, I think.
Absolutely. And then, of course, the other element here is that Comcast was investing heavily in their X1 set-top box, which was an expensive box. It was expensive for them. It was expensive for subscribers. All of this was happening while Roku and other devices were inexpensive streaming devices were ascending. So that business looked like, that opportunity looked like it was capped from the beginning. And of course, as we know, Comcast has lost 40% of its video subscribers in the last 5 years. They were at 18.2 million. Now they're down to 11.3 million. That number is probably only going to go further south going forward. And I think it raises a real question about, we talk about acquiring, who might acquire NBCU, but I don't think Comcast as a communication company is really that viable a standalone company either. Yep. In the world of these giants. So, yep. it's not going to be sold as a video company, that's for sure. It's going to be sold as a broadband company, and even the broadband side of the business has been
started to decline
recently.
Yeah.
So everywhere you look, I mean, I feel like the biggest Debbie Downer, but like every piece of Comcast and NBCU is challenged.
Yeah. They've got to do a lot of investment in their network.
Parks is probably the most insulated. The library,
possibly.
Maybe the studio.
So, I don't know. The split is bowing to the inevitable, maybe, but definitely doesn't hide the fact that the individual parts that are being split out have not benefited from their relationship with Comcast in the long run. So, sad story. Who knows where it will end, bearing in mind how long it will take that deal to actually come to fruition, and then the fact that they cannot be bought for 2 years. That's brutal.
Well, it's another chapter in the long-running saga that content and distribution do not belong under the same roof.
No.
And eventually that truism is shown over and over and over again. It's been the biggest fallacy of the media industry. Yeah. And this is the final unwind of that. So anyway, that's a lot of words, but to describe a very unfortunate situation for a lot of people and a lot of investors. But we'll see where this story takes us over the next 2 to 3 years.
Needless to say, it sounds like you're not going to be rushing out and taking a big position in the divided company.
No, and we will not even touch the topic of executive compensation in our short time, which is a whole nother egregious chapter of this story, how executive compensation has worked there over the last 5 to 10 years. But anyway, we'll leave it at that, Colin, and go USA and go England, right?
Go USA, go England. England, they've got a tough hill to climb where they've got to beat Mexico in Mexico City, in Azteca Stadium at a mile high. That's going to be tough. They're going to be gasping for breath, I think, at the end of that game.
Well, that'll be a big win if they can pull it off. Okay, we'll leave it at that, Colin. Good chatting. Thanks, everybody, for listening in on this week's Inside the Stream. And stay cool out there for anyone on the East Coast. We'll see you all again next week.
Inside the Stream is a production of In-Screen Media and Video News, all rights reserved.